The thing about turning 21 in a family like mine is that nobody actually cares about the birthday. They care about what you're inheriting, who's controlling it, and how fast they can get their hands on a piece of it before you even blow out the candles. My grandmother, Celeste, dropped the news right after dessert at Nobu, Malibu, her favorite power move location. The private room overlooking the Pacific, the kind of setup where Silicon Valley CEOs propose mergers and celebrities negotiate prenups. She'd ordered my favorite, the miso black cod, and waited until I had a bite in my mouth before sliding the leather portfolio across the table. The opaline is yours now, Ariana. All $53 million of it. The deed transfers tonight at midnight. I nearly choked. The Opaline wasn't just any hotel. It was the boutique property in Venice Beach that every influencer, every A-list musician, every tech founder with too much money and not enough taste begged to get into. 28 rooms, a rooftop pool that had been in 3 music videos, and a waitlist that stretched into next year. My grandmother had built it from a gutted 1920s apartment building back when Venice was still considered sketchy, back before the tech money rolled in and turned every warehouse into a startup incubator. Grandma, I don't know what to say. Don't say anything. Just don't screw it up, she smiled, that sharp smile that had intimidated real estate developers and city councilmen for 4 decades. Your mother doesn't know yet. I wanted you to hear it from me first. That should have been my first warning. Celeste never did anything without calculating every angle, every reaction, every potential fallout. She'd spent her whole life building an empire while my mother, her only daughter, had spent hers married to men who could pay for her lifestyle. 3 husbands by the time she turned 45, each one richer and less interesting than the last. My phone buzzed before we even left the restaurant. Mom's name lit up the screen. Then again. And again. You might want to put that on silent, Grandma said, signing the check with her distinctive scrawl. Give her time to adjust to the idea that you're not a child anymore. But my mother had never been good at adjusting to things she didn't control. I got home around 11 to the Brentwood house where I'd grown up, the sprawling Spanish colonial that my mom had won in her second divorce. The lights were all on, which was weird because Mom usually turned in early with her Ambien and her face mask. I barely put my keys on the entry table when I heard voices in the living room. Multiple voices. My mother stood by the fireplace in full makeup and a cream Zimmermann dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Next to her was Richard, husband number 4, who she'd married exactly 7 months ago in a ceremony at the San Ysidro Ranch that made it into 3 different society magazines. He was 52, tan in that orange-tinged way that spoke of too much time in Cabo, and he smiled at me with teeth so white they practically glowed. "There's our birthday girl," Mom said, her voice doing that thing where it sounded warm but her eyes stayed cold. "We've been waiting for you." "It's almost midnight. What's going on?" "What's going on is that your grandmother made a very significant decision tonight without consulting the family." She walked toward me, heels clicking on the travertine tile. "A hotel, Ariana, a $50 million property. Do you have any idea what kind of responsibility that is?" "I'm aware." Are you? Because managing a property like the Opaline requires experience, connections, financial sophistication. You just graduated from USC 6 months ago with a degree in art history. You've never run anything more complicated than your Instagram account. Richard stepped forward, hands in the pockets of his expensive slacks, playing the role of concerned stepfather. "What your mother means is that we want to help. The Opaline is family legacy. We should manage it together, as a family, pool our resources, our expertise." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. This wasn't concern. This was a takeover. "The deed transfers to me in," I checked my phone, "43 minutes. Grandma was very clear. I'm the sole owner." "Legally, yes." Mom moved closer, and I could smell her perfume, that Chanel No. 5 she'd worn my entire life. But practically, honey, you need us. The hotel has investors, high-profile clients, vendors with contracts that need renegotiating. Richard has connections throughout the LA hospitality industry. We could bring in consultants, expand the brand, maybe even franchise the concept. Franchise it? Grandma built that place to be exclusive, not some chain hotel. Your grandmother built it in a different era. The market has changed. If you want the Opaline to remain competitive, you need to think bigger. She reached out and touched my arm, her grip just a little too tight. This is a partnership, sweetheart. Family takes care of family. There it was, the word that was supposed to make me feel guilty for wanting what was legally, rightfully mine. I appreciate the offer, but I'm going to manage it myself. The temperature in the room dropped about 20 degrees. Richard's smile vanished. My mother's hand fell away from my arm. "That's your final decision?" Mom asked quietly. "It is." She stepped back, smoothed down her dress, and nodded slowly. When she looked at me again, the mask of maternal concern had completely disappeared. "Then pack your bags and leave this house." "What?" "You heard me. If you're going to disrespect this family, reject our help, act like some entitled little princess who thinks she knows better than the adults who've actually lived in the real world, then you can find somewhere else to live. This is my house, Ariana. My house, my rules. And rule number 1 is that we don't tolerate selfishness." I stared at her, genuinely shocked. "You're kicking me out for accepting a birthday gift?" "I'm giving you a reality check. You want to be independent? You want to play businesswoman? Fine, do it without living off me." She crossed her arms. "You have until morning. Pack whatever you can carry and leave your keys on the table." Richard put his hand on her shoulder, the picture of supportive husband, but I saw the calculation in his eyes. They'd planned this, the whole confrontation, probably rehearsed it before I got home. They'd expected me to cave, to agree to whatever partnership arrangement they'd dreamed up. My throat felt tight, but I wasn't going to cry, not in front of them. "Fine, I'll be gone by sunrise." I turned toward the stairs, but my mother's voice stopped me. "And Ariana, when you fail, when the Opaline starts bleeding money and those investors start circling, and you realize you're in way over your head, don't come crying back here. You made your choice." I didn't respond. I just climbed the stairs to my room and started pulling clothes from my closet, shoving them into the Louis Vuitton duffel and gotten for Christmas. My hands were shaking. 21 years old, and my mother had just kicked me out of the house for refusing to hand over my inheritance. Not because I'd done anything wrong, because I'd said no. I was almost finished packing when I heard footsteps on the stairs. Grandma Celeste appeared in my doorway, looking perfectly composed, despite the fact that it was nearly 1 in the morning. "I heard you might need a place to stay," she said. "How did you—" "Your mother called me, screaming about betrayal and disrespect, and how I'm turning you against your family. I hung up on her." She walked into my room and sat on the edge of my bed. "I knew she'd do this. I was counting on it, actually." "You wanted her to kick me out?" "I wanted you to see who she really is before you started making decisions about your future. Your mother has been trying to get her hands on the Opaline since I bought the property. She thinks it should have been hers. She's probably already got Richard talking to investors, planning renovations, dreaming about how they'll leverage it into their next big investment." I sat down next to her, the weight of the evening finally hitting me. "Why did you give it to me and not her?" "Because you're like me, Ariana. You see things. You understand that value isn't just about money. Your mother looks up the Opaline and sees dollar signs. You look at it and see the Art Deco details I restored, the local artists whose work hangs in every room, the community it serves. You get it." She patted my knee. "Besides, I wanted to see what she'd do. And now we both know." "So what now?" I crash at your place in Beverly Hills and wait for Mom to cool down? Grandma's smile turned sharp again, that look that meant she had another card to play. Actually, I have something else to show you, something I've been saving for the right moment. She pulled a plain manila envelope from her enormous Birkin bag. I need you to look at these documents very carefully, and then I need you to tell me if you still think your mother is just overprotective and Richard is just trying to help. I opened the envelope. Inside were printouts of bank statements, wire transfers, email exchanges. The first page showed an account in the Cayman Islands under the name of a shell corporation called Meridian Holdings, LLC. The amounts being transferred were staggering. Hundreds of thousands of dollars moving in and out over the past 6 months. What is this? That's Richard's company. Or rather, one of his companies, the one he uses for his less legitimate business ventures. Keep reading. I flipped through more pages. Email exchanges between Richard and someone named Marcus Vega talking about property acquisition, about timing, about making sure certain documents weren't filed until after the wedding. And then I found it. An email dated 2 weeks after my mother's wedding to Richard with the subject line, REA, the Opaline Acquisition Strategy. My stomach dropped as I read Richard's words. Now that the marriage is secure, we can move to phase 2. The granddaughter turns 21 in August. Celeste will likely transfer the property to her as planned. That's actually ideal. Much easier to pressure a naive girl fresh out of college than to fight the old woman in court. I'll position myself as the helpful stepfather. Victoria will play the concerned mother. Kid will cave within a week, sign whatever management agreement we put in front of her. Once we have operational control, we can restructure the debt, sell off the art collection, convert half the rooms to luxury condos. Conservative estimate, we triple our investment within 18 months. The words blurred in front of me. Richard had married my mother specifically to get access to the Opaline. This had all been planned. The whirlwind romance, the expensive wedding, the concerned stepfather routine. Everything. Does Mom know? My voice sounded strange, distant. Grandma's expression was unreadable. That's the question I've been trying to answer. Is she a willing participant in a con, or is she just another mark? She took the papers back and returned them to the envelope. Either way, they're not getting my hotel, and neither is your mother. What are we going to do? We? Nothing. This is your property now, Ariana. Your decision. She stood up, smoothed down her jacket. But if you want my advice, don't react. Don't confront them. Don't let them know what you know. Just take your time, learn the business, and watch very carefully. Predators always make mistakes when they think their prey is helpless. She left me sitting there with my half-packed bag, my phone full of increasingly angry texts from my mother, and a future that had gotten exponentially more complicated in the span of 6 hours. At 3 a.m., I finally finished packing. I loaded everything into my car, a white Range Rover that had been my high school graduation gift. As I backed out of the driveway, I looked up at the house where I'd grown up. The lights in my mother's bedroom were still on. I wondered if she was lying awake feeling guilty or if she was up planning her next move with Richard, already strategizing how to manipulate me into surrendering control of the only thing I'd ever been given that was truly mine. My phone buzzed one more time. A text from an unknown number. "Welcome to the game, sweetheart. Let's see how long you last. R." Richard. Somehow he'd gotten my new number, the one I'd just activated an hour ago, which meant he'd been tracking me, which meant this was going to get much worse before it got better. I drove to Grandma's house in Beverly Hills, but I didn't sleep. I sat in her guest room surrounded by my hastily packed belongings and went through every document she'd given me. By the time the sun came up, I understood exactly what Richard and his associates were planning. They wanted to gut the Opaline, strip it of everything that made it special, and turn it into just another generic luxury property designed to extract maximum profit from minimum authenticity. But what I still couldn't figure out was my mother's role in all of this. Was she the villain or the victim? Had she known from the beginning that Richard was using her, or had she fallen for the same con as everyone else? And if she did know, if she'd willingly participated in a scheme to steal from her own daughter, what did that mean about the woman who'd raised me? My phone rang at 7:30. Mom's name on the screen. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to pick up, to hear what she had to say. Ariana. Her voice sounded strained, almost frantic. We need to talk, right now, without Richard. There's something you need to know about him, about all of this. Something I just found out last night after you left. What are you talking about? I can't explain over the phone. Meet me at the Brentwood Country Mart in an hour. Come alone, please. She hung up before I could respond. I sat there holding my phone, trying to decide if this was genuine panic or just another manipulation. My mother had always been good at playing the victim when it suited her needs. But there'd been something in her voice, something raw and scared that I'd never heard before. Grandma knocked on my door around 8, carrying coffee and croissants from the French bakery down the street. Your mother called me 20 minutes ago, she said, setting the food down on the nightstand. Hysterical, saying Richard's not who he claims to be, saying she's made a terrible mistake and you're in danger. She told me to meet her this morning. Are you going to? I thought about it. About all the years my mother had prioritized her own comfort over my well-being. About the husbands who'd come and gone, each one bringing a new set of rules and expectations into our house. About how she'd thrown me out last night without a second thought the moment I didn't cooperate with her plans. But I also thought about that fear in her voice. Yeah, I said finally. I'm going to meet her. Grandma nodded slowly. Take this. She handed me a small device that looked like a fancy pen. Recording device. Federal court admissible audio quality. Whatever she tells you will want documentation. I met my mother at exactly 9 o'clock. She was sitting at an outdoor table wearing dark sunglasses and no makeup, which for her was basically the equivalent of showing up in pajamas. Her hands shook as she lifted her coffee cup. I don't have much time. Richard thinks I'm at hot yoga. She pulled an iPad from her bag and slid it across the table. I found this last night. He keeps it locked in his office safe, but I know the combination. I thought it was just boring business stuff, tax documents, whatever. I opened the iPad. The screen showed a series of documents, but these weren't the same ones Grandma had shown me. These were different. Worse. They were surveillance reports on me. Pages and pages of detailed information about my daily routine, my friends, my bank accounts, my social media activity. Photographs taken from a distance, me getting coffee, me at class, me meeting Grandma for lunch. Notes about where I went, who I talked to, what I bought. He's been watching you for over a year, Mom whispered, since before we even met, since before the engagement. This wasn't some opportunistic marriage, Ariana. He targeted me specifically because I'm Celeste's daughter, because you're her granddaughter. This whole thing was planned from the beginning. I kept scrolling, my hands getting colder with every page. Financial projections showing how Richard planned to leverage the Opaline into a portfolio of properties across California. Partnership agreements with investors I'd never heard of. And then, buried in a subfolder marked Insurance, I found something that made my blood stop. A contract with a private security firm based in Las Vegas, the kind of firm that did more than just guard doors and check IDs, the kind that specialized in making problems disappear. Mom, what is this? Her face had gone gray. I don't know, but that's not even the worst part. She reached over and swiped to another folder. Look at the date on these documents. I looked. The contracts, the surveillance reports, the financial projections, they all predated her relationship with Richard by at least 6 months, which meant he'd been planning this long before they'd ever met at that charity gala in Santa Barbara, where Mom claimed it had been love at first sight, which meant their entire relationship was a lie. And if Richard had gone to these lengths, if he'd orchestrated this elaborate con, spent over a year surveilling us and planning his approach, what else was he capable of? "You have to leave California," Mom said suddenly, urgently. "Take the deed, transfer it to a trust, put everything in your grandmother's name temporarily, I don't care. Just get away from here until we can figure out what he's actually planning." "I'm not running. The Opaline is mine."
Ariana, you're not listening to me. These people, they're not playing around. Whatever Richard wants with that hotel, it's worth enough to him that he married me, spent a year of his life on this con. People don't invest that kind of time and money unless the payoff is enormous. Her voice cracked. Or unless they're willing to do whatever it takes to get what they want. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. A text from Richard. "Tell your mother she's a terrible spy. See you both at home tonight for dinner. We have so much to discuss." Mom saw my face and grabbed the phone. Her hand flew to her mouth. "He knows," she breathed. "He knows I took the iPad." "Then we go to the police, right now. We show them everything." "And tell them what? That my husband married me under false pretenses? That he's been watching my daughter? None of this is illegal, Ariana. Creepy, yes. Grounds for divorce, absolutely. But not illegal." She was spiraling now, her voice getting higher. "He's been so careful. Every document, every contract, every—" She stopped mid-sentence. Her eyes went wide. "What? Mom, what is it?" "The prenup," she whispered. "He insisted on a prenup before the wedding, said it was just to protect his business interests, that it was standard practice. I didn't even read it carefully. My lawyer said it was fine." She looked at me with dawning horror. What if there's something in there, some clause that gives him access to family assets if certain conditions are met? My phone buzzed again. Another text from Richard. "Actually, let's make it breakfast tomorrow instead. 9 a.m., the Opaline's Rooftop Restaurant. I've already made reservations. Don't be late." I didn't sleep that night. How could I? I spent hours at Grandma's dining table going through every document, every contract, every piece of evidence we'd collected. Mom had sent me a copy of her prenup, and we found exactly what she'd feared. A clause buried in Section 12, subsection F, written in the kind of legal language designed to be overlooked. It stated that in the event of the marriage dissolving within the first 2 years, and if Richard could demonstrate financial harm resulting from the separation, he would be entitled to compensation from community property, including assets acquired by immediate family members during the marriage period through inheritance or gift. The Opaline had been transferred to me 3 days ago, well within the marriage period. "He's smarter than I gave him credit for," Grandma said, pouring herself a whiskey even though it was 2 in the morning. "He's created a legal pathway to claim the hotel without having to go through you directly. If your mother divorces him now, he can argue financial harm and come after the Opaline as compensation. But it's not Mom's property. It's mine. Which is why the prenup specifies immediate family members. He knew Celeste would never give it to your mother directly. He was counting on her giving it to you." She took a long drink. "The question is, what's his end game? Why go through all this trouble for one property?" I'd been wondering the same thing. The Opaline was valuable, sure, but $50 million wasn't enough to justify this level of planning. Richard was clearly connected to serious money if he could drop a year of his life on a con this elaborate. There had to be something else. That's when I remembered the subfolder on his iPad, the one marked Phase 3. Mom had been so panicked when she showed me the surveillance reports that we hadn't looked at everything. I pulled up the files she'd sent me and navigated to that folder. What I found made everything click into place. The Opaline wasn't the target.
the land was. Buried in Richard's files was a proposal from a development group called Pacific Meridian, which, not coincidentally, shared part of its name with his shell corporation. They wanted to buy the entire block where the Opaline sat, not just my hotel, but the vintage bookstore next door, the yoga studio, the coffee shop that had been there since the 80s. They wanted to tear it all down and build a mixed-use complex, luxury condos, high-end retail, a private members club, the kind of development that would completely transform Venice Beach. The proposal estimated the project value at over $400 million. He doesn't want to run the Opaline, I said slowly. He wants to demolish it. Grandma looked at the documents, her expression darkening. Venice is one of the last neighborhoods in LA that hasn't been completely overtaken by this kind of development. The community has fought off projects like this for years. But if he could get control of a key property like yours, something with historical significance, he could use it as leverage to convince the other owners to sell. Or worse, he could let the Opaline fail deliberately, claim the neighborhood is declining, and use that as justification for tearing everything down and starting over. We have to stop him. We will, but we have to be smart about it. Richard spent over a year planning this. We've had 3 days. She stood up, suddenly energized despite the late hour. The breakfast tomorrow, that's not a social call. He's going to make his move. Probably offer you some kind of deal, try to manipulate you into signing over management rights or selling entirely. He'll make it sound reasonable, like he's doing you a favor. What if I just don't show up? Then he'll escalate, and we don't know what escalation looks like for him yet. She tapped the documents. That security firm he's contracted, we need to know what he hired them for. Tomorrow morning, while you're at breakfast with Richard, I'm going to make some calls. I still have contacts in this city, people who owe me favors. We're going to find out exactly who Richard is and who he's working with. And Mom? Grandma's expression softened slightly. Your mother made terrible choices, but I don't think she understood what she was getting into. Richard played her just as much as he tried to play you. I wasn't so sure about that, but I was too tired to argue. The next morning, I dressed carefully for breakfast. Not too expensive, didn't want to look like I was trying too hard. Not too casual, needed to show I took this seriously. I ended up in jeans, a silk blouse, and the Cartier watch Grandma had given me for my 18th birthday. Armor, disguised as accessories. Mom texted me at 8:30. Don't go alone, please. But I had to. Whatever Richard was planning, I needed to hear it directly. And I needed him to think I was still the naive college graduate he'd been counting on. The Opaline looked different now that it was mine. I'd been there dozens of times over the years. Grandma used to take me for lunch on the rooftop, let me swim in the pool while she worked in her office. But now, walking through the lobby with its carefully restored Art Deco details, its walls covered with work from local artists, its staff greeting me by name, I felt the weight of responsibility. This place mattered, not just financially, but culturally. It represented something real in a city that was increasingly dominated by generic luxury and manufactured authenticity. Richard was already at the rooftop restaurant, sitting at the best table, the one with views of both the ocean and the Venice canals. He looked relaxed, confident. He probably thought he'd already won. Ariana, you look lovely. He stood up and actually tried to hug me like we were family, like he hadn't just spent a year stalking me. I stepped back. Let's just get to it, Richard. What do you want?
Direct. I like that. Your mother said you'd inherited Celeste's spine. He gestured to the chair across from him. Please, sit. I ordered the breakfast tasting menu. The chef here is exceptional. I'm not hungry. Fair enough. He leaned back, studied me with those calculating eyes. I assume your mother told you about the prenup, about the compensation clause. She did. And I assume your grandmother showed you the Cayman Islands accounts, the emails, probably some version of my business plan for this property. I kept my expression neutral, but inside I was scrambling.
He knew. He'd known all along that we were gathering evidence. "Here's what's going to happen," Richard continued, his voice pleasant, conversational. "You're going to sign over operational control of the Opaline to a management company I've established. You'll remain the owner of record. I'm not trying to steal from you, despite what your family thinks. But I'll handle the day-to-day operations, the financial decisions, the strategic direction of the property. In exchange, I'll make sure the prenup issue goes away. Your mother and I will have an amicable divorce. I'll waive any claims to community property, and everyone walks away happy. Except you'll run the hotel into the ground and then sell the land to your development partners." He smiled. "I see you've done your homework. That's good. It'll make this conversation easier." He poured himself more coffee like we were discussing the weather. "Here's what you need to understand, Ariana. That development is happening whether you cooperate or not. I have commitments from 6 of the 9 property owners on this block. The holdouts are you, the bookstore owner who's 83 years old and won't last another 2 years, and the yoga studio that's 3 months behind on rent. It's inevitable. Venice won't approve a project like that. Venice doesn't have to approve anything. The city of Los Angeles will approve it, and I have very good relationships with the city council members who matter." He leaned forward. "This is a $400 million project, Ariana. Do you know what kind of money can do? The jobs it creates, the tax revenue, the political capital? Your grandmother built the Opaline in a different era, when cities cared about preservation and character. But this is LA in 2025. Development always wins. Always." I thought about the recording device Grandma had given me, currently in my jacket pocket, capturing every word. "And if I refuse?" "Then things get complicated. The prenup gives me leverage over your mother's assets, which means I can make her life very difficult. And let's be honest, your mother isn't strong. She'll crack under pressure, probably do something stupid like try to interfere with your management of the hotel. Maybe there's a family conflict. Maybe operations suffer. Maybe guests start complaining. Property values decline. And when a historic property starts failing, the city becomes much more amenable to redevelopment proposals." He shrugged. "Or we could skip all that unpleasantness and you just cooperate now." "There's a third option." "Oh, and what's that?" "I expose you. I go to the press with everything. The surveillance, the shell companies, the prenup fraud, all of it. Maybe it's not illegal, but it's definitely bad publicity, and I'm willing to bet your development partners don't want their $400 million project associated with a con artist who stalked a college student." For the first time, Richard's smile faltered. "You'd destroy your own mother's reputation in the process, humiliate her publicly. Maybe she deserves it. Maybe she does." He studied me for a long moment. "You're not what I expected, Ariana. When I started researching this family, everyone said you were the soft one, the artistic daughter who'd rather paint than deal with business, the girl who'd cave under pressure. People underestimate me a lot. Clearly." He stood up, buttoned his jacket. "Here's my final offer. You have 72 hours to decide. Sign over operational control and walk away with your $50 million and your dignity intact, or refuse, and I'll bury you in legal warfare that'll drag on for years. I have lawyers, investigators, resources you can't imagine. I will make running this hotel so difficult, so expensive, so stressful that you'll beg me to take it off your hands, and then I'll buy it for pennies on the dollar. Or I could just wait for your scheme to fall apart on its own. Cons do eventually. Is that what your grandmother told you?" He laughed. "Celeste built her empire in the 80s and 90s. This is a different game now. The rules have changed." He walked away, leaving me alone on the rooftop with an untouched breakfast and a recording that probably wasn't enough to stop him. I called Grandma immediately. He threatened me, basically admitted everything, but in a way that's probably not prosecutable. I expected as much. "Come to my house, now. I found something." 30 minutes later, I was back in Grandma's dining room, surrounded by even more documents than before. But these weren't Richard's files. These were from someone else entirely. Marcus Vega, Grandma said, pointing to a photograph of a man in his 60s with gray hair and expensive suits. Richard's primary business partner and the lead investor in Pacific Meridian. I've been digging into his background all morning. Turns out Mr. Vega has a very interesting history. She spread out a series of articles from the Las Vegas Review-Journal and the Los Angeles Times, stories about failed developments, investors who lost millions, properties that mysteriously burned down right before insurance policies were set to expire. He's been investigated 4 times by federal authorities, Grandma continued. Money laundering, insurance fraud, witness intimidation. Nothing ever stuck, but the pattern is clear. Vega finances developments through questionable means, uses leverage and intimidation to force property owners to sell, and when people don't cooperate, bad things happen to their businesses. So Richard's working with an actual criminal? Not just working with. Richard is the respectable face of Vega's operation, the charming guy who wines and dines property owners, who makes the development sound like progress and community improvement. And when charm doesn't work, Vega's people step in. The security firm. Exactly. I made some calls to contacts in Vegas. That firm has been linked to Vega for years. They're not there to guard construction sites, Ariana. They're there to convince holdouts to sell. I felt sick. What does that mean for me? It means Richard's 72-hour ultimatum isn't just a negotiating tactic. It's a timeline. 3 days to decide, and then things will start happening. Maybe permits get mysteriously delayed. Maybe health inspectors find violations that don't exist. Maybe there's an electrical fire that's just unfortunate enough to trigger your insurance deductible. She looked at me seriously. These people play for keeps. So what do? We can't go to the police if none of this is technically illegal yet. No, but we can play offense instead of defense. She pulled out another folder, this one containing documents I hadn't seen before. Building permits from Venice Beach, property records, transfer agreements. While you were at breakfast, I made some calls to the other property owners on your block, the ones Richard claimed had already agreed to sell. Turns out, he was lying. Only 3 have signed preliminary agreements, and 2 of those are having second thoughts. The bookstore owner, her name's Dorothy Chen, she told me someone's been pressuring her grandson to convince her to sell, following him, making veiled threats about the neighborhood getting dangerous. Vegas people? Almost certainly. But here's the thing. If we can organize the property owners, get them to stand together and refuse to sell, Richard and Vega's whole plan falls apart. They need a critical mass of properties to make the development viable. Without that, they can't get financing, can't get permits, can't move forward. You want to organize a community resistance? I want you to. You're the owner of the most prominent property on the block, the one with the famous grandmother who built a legacy here. If you stand up publicly and say you're not selling, that the Opaline will remain as it is, the other owners will follow your lead. And Richard will come after me harder? Probably. But by then, we'll have exposed him, not through courts or police, but through the one thing that actually matters in this city, public opinion. She pulled out her phone and showed me a contact list. I still know every journalist, every blogger, every influencer who covers LA real estate and development. We leak the story, the surveillance, the prenup scam, Vega's criminal history, all of it. We make Richard and his partners toxic. No investor will want to be associated with them. No city official will want to approve their permits. No business will want to partner with them. That's playing dirty. They brought a gun to this fight, sweetheart. I'm just making sure you have one too. I thought about it, about the risk, the exposure, the potential for everything to blow up in my face. But I also thought about Dorothy Chen, the 83-year-old bookstore owner being harassed, about the yoga studio owner struggling with rent, about all the small businesses that made Venice what it was, being pushed out by developers who saw the neighborhood as nothing more than profit potential. Okay, I said, let's do it. The next 48 hours were a blur. Grandma and I reached out to every property owner on the block, organized a meeting at the Opaline. Dorothy Chen came with her grandson, who confirmed that men in dark USVs had been following him, leaving notes on his windshield about how dangerous the neighborhood was getting. The yoga studio owner, a woman named Priya, brought security footage showing the same men tampering with her locks, her alarm system, her storefront. We documented everything, and then Grandma made her calls. By Friday morning, the Los Angeles Times had a front-page story: LA developer accused of intimidation tactics in Venice Beach land grab. The article detailed Vegas criminal history, Richard's surveillance of me, the prenup fraud scheme, the harassment of local business owners. It quoted Dorothy, Priya, and half a dozen other Venice residents who'd been pressured to sell their properties. But the real damage came from social media. I'd never considered myself an influencer, but I had about 50,000 Instagram followers from my art history posts and my connection to Grandma. I posted a video that morning, standing on the roof of the Opaline, explaining everything: the inheritance, the threats, the development scheme, the harassment. They thought I'd be easy to manipulate because I'm young, I said to the camera. They thought I'd cave under pressure because I don't have experience. But this hotel isn't just property to me. It's legacy. It's community. It's proof that you can build something valuable without destroying everything around it. The video went viral. Within 6 hours, it had over 2 million views. Every major news outlet in LA picked up the story. Venice Beach residents organized a protest outside the city council offices. Local politicians who'd been quietly supportive of the development suddenly distanced themselves. And Richard's investors started pulling out. I watched it unfold from Grandma's house, monitoring news feeds and social media as Richard's entire operation collapsed. Pacific Meridian issued a statement saying they were suspending development plans pending a further investigation. Vega's name appeared in multiple federal inquiries, and Richard himself disappeared, left the country, according to Mom, who filed for divorce that same day. But I wasn't satisfied with just stopping the development. I wanted justice. That's when I remembered the detail that had been bothering me since the beginning: the security firm Richard had contracted. Their services had been paid for through a very specific type of wire transfer, the kind that left a traceable federal record. I gave that information to the FBI agent who'd been investigating Vega for years. Within a week, they'd connected Richard's payments to 3 other cases of property owner intimidation across California. Federal charges were filed, RICO statutes applied. Richard's carefully constructed facade crumbled. The prenup was invalidated due to fraud. Mom got a favorable settlement and, more importantly, her freedom. She moved into a condo in Santa Monica and started seeing a therapist 3 times a week. "I'm sorry," she told me one afternoon over coffee, about a month after everything imploded. "I should have protected you. I should have seen what he was doing." He was good at manipulation. That's what con artists do. But I'm your mother. I should have put you first. She looked tired, older than her 50 years. I spent so long trying to find security through marriage that I forgot how to find it in myself. And I almost let you get hurt in the process. I didn't know how to respond to that. Part of me was still angry at her for kicking me out, for choosing Richard over me even briefly. But another part of me understood that she'd been a victim too, just in a different way. "We're going to need to rebuild our relationship," I said finally, "and it's going to take time. I know. I'm willing to do the work if you are." I am. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't some tearful reunion where everything was instantly forgiven, but it was honest, which was more than we'd had in years. The Opaline thrived. I hired a proper management team, people who actually cared about hospitality and art and community, not just profit margins. We expanded our artist residency program, partnered with local nonprofits, became a gathering place for the Venice community we'd fought to protect. Grandma stepped back from her other business ventures and spent more time at the hotel, teaching me everything she knew about running a property with integrity. Some days she was tough, pushing me to make harder decisions, to think 3 steps ahead. Other days she was warm, reminiscing about the early days when she'd renovated the building herself, when Venice was still rough around the edges. "You did good," she told me 6 months after Richard's arrest. We were sitting on the rooftop at sunset, watching the sky turn orange and purple over the Pacific. "I wasn't sure you had it in you when I first gave you the deed, but you proved me wrong." "You mean you were testing me this whole time?" "Of course I was testing you. This business isn't for the weak. You needed to prove you could handle pressure before I trusted you with my legacy." She smiled. "And you handled it better than I could have imagined." I thought about that night at Nobu, when she'd slid the portfolio across the table and changed my life. About how she'd known exactly what giving me the opaline would trigger, how she'd calculated every angle, anticipated every move my mother and Richard would make. "You knew," I said slowly. "You knew Mom would react badly. You probably even suspected Richard had ulterior motives." "I suspected. I didn't know for certain until I started digging. But yes, I knew your mother would show her true colors. I needed you to see it for yourself." "That's kind of manipulative, Grandma." "It absolutely is, but you're stronger for it. You know who your allies are now, you know what you're capable of handling, and you own a hotel without any strings attached or family drama clouding your judgment." She wasn't wrong. As brutal as the whole experience had been, I had emerged from it with clarity I'd never had before. About my family, about business, about myself. Richard went to trial the following spring. I attended the sentencing hearing with Grandma, watching as the judge handed down 8 years for wire fraud, extortion, and conspiracy. Vega got 15. The security firm lost its license and faced civil suits from dozens of victims. "Do you feel vindicated?" Grandma asked as we left the courthouse. "I feel relieved," I said, "and I feel grateful that we stopped them before anyone got seriously hurt." "You stopped them. I just provided the weapons. You're the one who had the courage to fight." That night, I stood on the rooftop of the Opaline, looking out at Venice Beach, at the neighborhood we'd saved from being demolished and rebuilt to something soulless and generic. The bookstore was still there, the yoga studio was thriving, the coffee shop was packed with locals and tourists alike. My phone buzzed, a text from Mom. "Proud of you. Really, truly proud." I smiled and texted back, "Thanks. Want to have dinner next week?" Her response was immediate. "Yes, please." It wasn't a perfect ending. Mom and I still had years of rebuilding ahead of us. The hotel still faced challenges, competition from chain properties, rising costs, the ever-changing dynamics of LA real estate. And I knew there would be more people like Richard, more developers and investors who saw the Opaline as nothing more than a valuable piece of land. But I also knew I could handle it, because I'd learned the most important lesson Grandma could have taught me, that real power doesn't come from manipulation or money or intimidation. It comes from knowing your worth, protecting what matters, and refusing to back down when predators circle. I was 21 years old, I owned a $50 million hotel, and I just defeated a criminal conspiracy through intelligence, determination, and community solidarity. Grandma was right. I was ready for whatever came next.